Do you know why Apple, Google, Microsoft, these tech giants, still have to bow down to certain families that 99% of us have never heard of? Today, I'm going to reveal a truth that the global elite doesn't want you to know. There are dynasties that own more wealth than the GDP of Brazil, Russia, or India combined, but their names never appear on the Forbes billionaire list. Why? Because they don't need fame, they need power. And real power doesn't come from owning a company or brand, but from controlling money itself. Listen to this. While Elon Musk had to borrow money from banks to buy Twitter for $44 billion, there are families who are those banks. They don't need to borrow money, they create money. Do you see the difference? After reading this, you'll understand why no matter how hard you work your entire life, you can never become as wealthy as them in a single day. You'll understand why, with every economic crisis, they get richer while we get poorer. And most importantly, you'll never look at the global financial system the same way again. I'm going to expose the 300-year history of banking dynasty domination, how they turned the entire world into debt slaves, why presidents and prime ministers must obey them, and how they engineer every crisis to collect trillions of dollars. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented historical fact. The story begins in 1744, when Mayer Amschel Rothschild was born in Frankfurt, Germany. His father was a small merchant, but Mayer had a vision no one else imagined, controlling the currency of all of Europe. Mayer understood a truth that few recognize today. Whoever controls a nation's money supply cares not who makes its laws. His strategy was simple but brilliant. Send his 5 sons to the 5 largest financial centers in Europe: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt. Each established a bank with the same family name, same strategy, but in 5 different countries. This was the first step in building a global financial empire. In 1815, the Battle of Waterloo didn't just decide Napoleon's fate, it decided who would dominate the world economy for the next 200 years. Nathan Rothschild in London had a private intelligence network faster than the British government itself. When Wellington defeated Napoleon, Nathan knew 24 hours before anyone else. But instead of buying stocks, he sold everything. The market panicked, thinking Napoleon had won, and stock prices collapsed. Then Nathan quietly bought everything back at rock-bottom prices. In just one day, the Rothschild family made profits 20 times their initial investment. That's how they turned information into a weapon of mass destruction. And from then on, they understood that you don't need to own everything. You just need to control the flow of information and the flow of money. After Waterloo, the Rothschilds didn't just lend money to individuals, they lent to entire governments. The mechanism worked like this. First, a nation needs money for war, construction, or crisis. Second, Rothschild offers loans at attractive interest rates. Third, that nation falls into unpayable debt. Finally, Rothschild demands collateral in the form of national assets or political power. The result, entire nations become debtors to a private family. Mayer Rothschild once said, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws." This wasn't boasting, it was a strategic declaration. While the Rothschilds dominated Europe, across the Atlantic, John D. Rockefeller was building his own empire in America. Starting with oil through Standard Oil, Rockefeller quickly realized that oil was just a tool. The real goal was controlling the financial system. In 1913, the Rockefeller family and partners established the Federal Reserve, America's central bank. What's remarkable is that the Federal Reserve isn't a government agency, but a private corporation owned by private banks. This means the power to print USD, the world's strongest currency, belongs to a group of private families, not the US government. Can you see the terrifying level of power? J.P. Morgan wasn't just a figure in financial history, he was the architect of the modern banking system. Morgan understood that instead of competing with Rothschild and Rockefeller, it was better to cooperate. He became the bridge between European capital and American markets. Morgan's strategy was to not own everything but control everything, create massive corporations, then control them from behind the scenes, turning businesses into chess pieces in a larger game. When the Titanic sank in 1912, J.P. Morgan was scheduled to be on board, but mysteriously canceled at the last minute. Coincidentally, those who died on the ship were all financiers who opposed the establishment of the Federal Reserve. It might just be coincidence, but a year later, the Federal Reserve was established without any significant opposition. If Rothschild was the emperor, Rockefeller the king, Morgan the general, then Warburg was the strategist. Max Warburg in Germany and Paul Warburg in America, two brothers from the same family, but standing on opposite sides of World War I. This wasn't coincidence. The Warburg strategy was that although two nations were at war, both needed to borrow money to buy weapons, and the Warburg family lent money to both sides. The result, regardless of who won or lost, Warburg always won. They didn't care about politics or ideology, only profit. Think about this. Why does a 0.25% interest rate increase by the US Fed cause stock markets in Vietnam, Thailand, and Brazil to all drop? Why does a stronger USD affect economies worldwide? The answer is because the Fed isn't just America's central bank. It's effectively the central bank of the world. And the Fed is owned by private banks, which belong to these dynasties. The network operates like this. The Fed decides global monetary policy. The IMF and World Bank implement that policy. National central banks must comply, and governments are forced to adjust their policies. This isn't a democratic system. It's a financial feudal system. The Bank for International Settlements, BIS, in Basel, Switzerland, is perhaps the most powerful organization that 99.9% of people have never heard of. BIS is called the central bank of central banks, and every central bank in the world must report to BIS. Who owns BIS? Central banks. Who owns central banks? Private banks. Who owns private banks? The dynasties. This is the peak of the global financial power pyramid. The Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications (SWIFT) controls nearly all international financial transactions. Want to transfer money from the US to Europe? Must go through SWIFT. Want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia? Must go through SWIFT. Want to export goods? Must go through SWIFT. Who controls SWIFT? Major US and European banks. Who controls these banks? You already know the answer. When a country doesn't obey, they get cut off from the SWIFT system, meaning that country cannot trade with the outside world. That's economic death sentence. Russia was partially cut from SWIFT after the Ukraine conflict. Iran has been cut for years. This isn't a government decision. It's a decision by banking dynasties. Have you ever wondered why countries around the world all apply similar economic policies? All lower interest rates during recession, all raise rates during inflation, all pump money during crisis, all tighten during recovery. This isn't coincidence. It's the result of global coordination. The mechanism works like this. BIS issues policy recommendations. The IMF advises countries on economic policy. The World Bank threatens to cut aid if they don't comply, and countries are forced to follow. The 1997 Asian financial crisis wasn't a random event, but an organized attack aimed at controlling Asian economies. The scenario unfolded in 4 stages. From 1990 to 1996, international investment funds poured money into Asia, creating an asset bubble. In 1997, they simultaneously withdrew capital, creating a financial storm. During 1997 to 1998, the IMF rescued with harsh conditions. Finally, from 1999 to 2000, Western corporations bought Asian assets at bargain prices. Who benefited? Not the IMF or US government, but investment funds and banks owned by the dynasties. Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea, the Asian tigers were forced to sell national assets to foreigners, giving the dynasties additional bases in Asia. Today, they don't need armies to invade a country. They just need to lend that country money. The model works like this. The World Bank lends for infrastructure construction. Projects get inflated costs, making the nation owe more than expected, unable to repay. They must collateralize ports, airports, and mineral resources. And finally, Western corporations control strategic assets. Sri Lanka is a perfect example when the Hambantota port was built with Chinese loans. But when unable to repay, Sri Lanka had to lease this port for 99 years. This is modern colonialism. Have you ever wondered why American presidents, whether Democrat or Republican, all have nearly identical financial policies? The answer is because they're not the ones deciding financial policy. The Fed is. When a president wants to go against the dynasties, Abraham Lincoln wanted to print money without going through private banks, and was assassinated. James Garfield wanted to control the banking system and was assassinated. John F. Kennedy wanted to abolish the Fed and print United States notes and was also assassinated. Maybe just coincidence, but since then, no American president has dared to touch the Fed. The 1920s saw America living in the golden age, with stocks rising endlessly, everyone getting rich, everyone borrowing money to invest. But this was the trap. In 1928, the Fed began raising interest rates. In 1929, major banks began massive stock selling. The market collapsed and millions lost everything. Who benefited? Those with enough cash to buy assets at dirt cheap prices. Who had enough cash? The banking dynasties. Joseph Kennedy, JFK's father, once said, "When the shoeshine boy starts giving stock tips, it's time to sell everything." That's the elite mindset. Sell when everyone buys, buy when everyone sells. The 2008 crisis was labeled the subprime crisis, but was actually the result of 20 years of preparation. The scenario unfolded from 1990 to 2006, with the Fed lowering interest rates, encouraging home buying. From 2000 to 2006, banks lent freely, creating a real estate bubble. From 2006-2007, the Fed raised rates, making people unable to pay debts. In 2008, markets collapsed and banks were too big to fail. The result? The U.S. government had to bail out banks with taxpayer money, people lost homes, banks got rescued, dynasties bought assets cheap. Lehman Brothers collapsed, but Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, the core banks of the dynasties, were all saved. This wasn't coincidence, it was the plan. The COVID-19 pandemic created a global economic crisis, but what was the final result? Small businesses went bankrupt en masse, large corporations had record profits, workers lost jobs and income, while billionaires increased wealth by 50% in 2 years. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates saw their wealth increase by tens of billions, but they weren't the biggest beneficiaries. The biggest beneficiaries were large investment funds like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, the chess pieces of the dynasties. They bought millions of real estate properties at cheap prices when people couldn't pay their debts. This was the greatest wealth transfer from the middle class to the ultra-wealthy. To dominate the world, controlling money isn't enough. They must also control information. Who owns the world's largest media conglomerates? Disney is funded by dynasty investment funds. CNN and Fox News have major shareholders who are investment banks. The New York Times and Washington Post have financial ties to banking corporations. The result, the information you receive daily, has all been filtered through their hands. Why don't you hear about these dynasties on TV? Because they own that TV. Elite universities like Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge all have massive endowments from the dynasties. Whoever provides funding decides the curriculum. Why do economics students learn about free markets but not market manipulation? Why learn about healthy competition but not financial monopolies? Because they don't want you to understand how they operate. Most politicians have campaign funding from large corporations owned by investment funds, and these investment funds belong to the dynasties. The vicious cycle. Dynasties fund politicians. Politicians pass laws benefiting corporations. Corporations generate profits for dynasties. Dynasties have more money to fund politicians. This is fake democracy. So what can you do? The first thing you need to do is don't play by their rules. Don't borrow money to buy bubble assets. Don't believe in miracle investment opportunities. Don't keep all your money in banks during high inflation. Don't buy when everyone's buying. And sell when everyone's selling. Learn to read economic cycles. When interest rates are low, be wary of asset bubbles. When media is overly optimistic, prepare for recession. When everyone's panicking, look for investment opportunities. Don't put all eggs in one basket. Some cash to buy opportunities during crises, some gold to fight inflation, some real estate, not speculative, and some skills that no one can take from you. Knowledge is power. The more you understand the system, the less you'll be deceived. Things to learn include financial history to understand past crises, macroeconomics to understand monetary policy impacts, crowd psychology to know when to go against the grain, and financial analysis to read real financial reports. Teach your children these things because the education system won't. Don't depend entirely on the system. Learn practical skills like repair, farming, crafts, build relationships with local communities, create income sources not dependent on monthly salary, and have contingency plans for emergencies. Don't join the rat race, the game they designed so you can never escape. Borrow money to buy a house, then pay debt your whole life without ever truly owning it. Work for salary, then spend everything each month without accumulating assets. Invest following trends, then buy high, sell low, and lose money continuously. Instead, live below your means, save before spending, invest in cash-flowing assets, not pretty assets, and create real value instead of speculation. The World Economic Forum has publicly announced the Great Reset, a plan to rebuild the global economic system with stated goals of you will own nothing and be happy, sharing economy replacing private ownership, digital currency replacing cash, and stakeholder capitalism replacing free markets. Translated into real language, you will rent everything from them. They control your spending completely through digital currency. Large corporations will cooperate instead of compete, and this is digital feudalism. Central bank digital currency is not cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, but a tool of absolute control. With CBDC, they can know what you buy, where, when, lock your money if you don't obey laws, set expiration dates for money, unused money disappears, and completely control the economy through data. China has successfully deployed this. Other countries are following. Currently, there's a war between the old side, USD plus traditional banking system of the dynasties, and the new side, Chinese yuan plus ruble plus Bitcoin of China, Russia, and the crypto community. The result of this war will determine who controls the world economy for the next 50 years, which currency becomes the world's reserve currency, and whether you live in a free or controlled world. AI and big data are becoming new weapons in the control war to predict human behavior, manipulate psychology through social media, control information people access, and automate punishment of those who don't comply. Whoever controls technology will control the world. Currently, major tech corporations all have major shareholders who are dynasty investment funds, but China is developing an independent technology system. This is the real war of the 21st century. After everything we've learned, you can see that the world isn't run by governments, but by a small group of families who have controlled the global financial system for over 300 years. Democracy is just a facade. In reality, we're living in a financial empire that few recognize. Every crisis has beneficiaries, and those beneficiaries are always the same group of people. You've been raised to become a financial slave, working your whole life to pay debt, never truly free. Why am I sharing this? Not to create despair, but to create awakening. When you understand the rules of the game, you can avoid financial traps, protect your family from crises, capitalize on opportunities when the system resets, and educate the next generation about the truth. Knowledge is the only power they cannot take away. Don't wait for someone to save you, because politicians can't save you when they're also chess pieces in the bigger game. You can only save yourself. Step 1. Stop blindly trusting the system. Research yourself, study yourself, make your own decisions. Step 2. Prepare for the big changes coming. The world is about to reset. Do you want to be a victim or beneficiary? Step 3. Share this knowledge with loved ones, because the more people who wake up, the harder they are to control. For 300 years, the dynasties have built a perfect control system. They control money, information, education, politics. But they have one weakness. The system only works when we don't know about it. When 1% of the population understands the system, they can control the other 99%. But when 10% of the population awakens, the system begins to shake. When 20% of the population understands the truth, the system will collapse. Which number are you? Today, you've been awakened. Tomorrow, what will you do with this knowledge? Silence is complicity with oppression. If this article opened your eyes, share it to awaken more people. That's the only way we can change the world. Remember, truth always wins, but only when enough people know it. The battle for real freedom begins with understanding the enemy. Whoever controls a nation's money controls that nation. Whoever controls the world's money controls the world. Now you know who they are.